A group of German women who had been prisoners of war during the conflict were told that they could finally return to their homeland. But when the news came, many of them felt fear and uncertainty. For Germany was a country in ruins, and the life they had known was gone. They had spent years working in Britain in farms, kitchens, and hospitals, slowly learning the language and customs and forming bonds with the local people who had at first treated them with caution, but over time offered friendship and care. The women found themselves caught between duty and desire, between the call of a homeland that might no longer welcome them and the safety and stability they had found in a foreign land. They rose each morning to tend the fields, to prepare meals and to care for children and the elderly. And in these acts, they discovered a sense of purpose that had been absent for years. They shared stories in whispers of families lost, of towns destroyed, of friends who would never return. And they laughed quietly at the absurdity of life when the war seemed so recent and the memories so sharp. Yet amidst the sorrow, they discovered moments of joy in the smiles of neighbors. The warmth of food shared the soft light of mornings that seemed peaceful and ordinary. And in the quiet of night, they dreamed of staying, of building a future in the land that had been enemy, yet now offered refuge. They learned to read the subtle signals of acceptance, a nod from a farmer, a quiet smile. From a shopkeeper, an invitation to help in the garden, a shared loaf of bread. Each gesture small but profound, and over time these gestures became proof that life could be rebuilt, that trust could emerge even after betrayal and fear. They walked along winding paths lined with hedges and trees, noticing the subtle changes of the seasons, the way the sunlight fell across the fields, the sound of birds returning each morning, the smell of damp earth after rain, and they felt a rhythm that was absent in Germany, the rhythm of ordinary life that demanded care and attention and offered reward in small acts of productivity and connection. They tended gardens, growing vegetables, flowers, and herbs, learning to coax life from the soil, and in each leaf harvested, each flower nurtured. They found a sense of control over their own existence that had been denied in captivity, and in the chaos of war they spoke to one another late at night, sharing fragments of memory, fragments of dreams they had once carried, fragments of hope they were afraid to voice. In the day they whispered of fathers and mothers who no longer existed, of siblings they might never see again, of children who would grow up without them. And in these conversations, the women discovered a fragile bond stronger than nationality, stronger than the war itself. They sang old songs, remembering the melodies of home, and in singing, they found comfort and sorrow intertwined. They learned to laugh again, to play small games with children who did not understand the language fully, yet responded to gestures and warmth. They watched the seasons shift, noticing how frost glistened in early mornings, how rain nourished the earth, how the wind bent the trees and carried scents from distant fields, and each observation became a reminder that life persisted and that they were participants in it. Not just survivors of destruction, they learned to cook meals for large groups, sharing skills and recipes from childhood kitchens, discovering that food could be both sustenance and connection, that preparing a meal could be an act of love and acceptance. They cleaned and sewed and repaired clothing, finding satisfaction in the utility of work and the smiles it brought to those around them. Over time, the villagers grew accustomed to their presence, to the quiet diligence of their hands, the steady rhythm of their labor, the gentle humor they brought to small interactions. The children laughed freely around them, no longer afraid, and the adults came to rely on their contributions in the kitchen, in the fields, and in homes that needed care. The women often reflected on the contrast between their former lives and this present reality. The war had demanded survival and obedience. This new life demanded empathy and attention. And through it, they began to understand that freedom was not simply the absence of chains, but the presence of choice. The choice to care, the choice to contribute, the choice to be seen as human. They faced moments of doubt when letters arrived from authorities instructing repatriation, or when memories of Germany haunted their dreams. Yet in those moments, they also remembered the kindness they had experienced, the safety they had found, the warmth of human connection, and they clung to it like a lifeline. They walked along the riverbanks watching reflections in the water, noticing the play of sunlight across its surface, feeling a small serenity they had not known in years. They observed the villagers working together in festivals and fairs, in church gatherings and community projects, and slowly they began to see themselves as part of this world, a world that had once been hostile, yet now offered continuity and possibility. They dreamed quietly of gardens filled with flowers, of kitchens filled with laughter, of children growing up knowing care and attention, and as they dreamed, they also worried about the uncertainty of the future. The letters and orders from distant officials reminded them that their place was not guaranteed, that they could be sent away at any moment. Yet despite this looming threat, they nurtured hope and belonging. They wrote letters that they did not send, filled with confessions of longing and fear of love and loyalty to a land they had never imagined could feel like home. They shared their dreams in whispers with one another, exchanging visions of lives they might lead if they were allowed to stay, and each night they fell asleep, with a fragile sense of peace, the small triumph of ordinary life over extraordinary destruction. The quiet assertion that they were more than prisoners, more than enemies, more than statistics. They were women, with agency, with memory, with desire. And in this quiet assertion they found strength and resilience, and a tentative hope for the future. The women pleaded quietly with the officials who had brought them to Britain, who had promised repatriation, but now listened with patience to the stories of longing and survival that had grown in the years of exile. They spoke of the warmth of kitchens filled with neighbors, of children who had learned to smile in their presence, of gardens that bore the fruits of their labor. And they asked, not for privilege, but for the chance to remain in a land that had become refuge. They wrote letters. They never sent letters filled with memories of home, letters filled with fears of the unknown, letters filled with hope for acceptance, and in the secrecy of those letters they revealed the deepest corners of their hearts. They observed the village around them, noticing small acts of kindness that had once seemed impossible. A farmer offering extra vegetables to a woman who had tended his fields, a neighbor inviting her to help with a harvest, a child running up to ask a question and then laughing at the answer. The women began to understand that trust could be built slowly, that forgiveness could take the form of shared labor and attention, and that home could be created in fragments and mosaics rather than in grand gestures. They attended local events, helping in kitchens and halls, offering their hands and their knowledge and learning from those who had welcomed them fully into their lives. They participated in festivals and church gatherings, feeling the hum of community in their chests and the quiet satisfaction of being useful in ways that mattered. They watched the seasons pass with new eyes, noticing the way light shifted across fields, the pattern of clouds in the sky, the subtle changes in the wind, and in these small details they found a rhythm of life that was absent in the chaos of war and captivity. They taught children to plant flowers and herbs, to care for animals, to recognize the value of patience and attention, and in teaching, they discovered the possibility of legacy, of being remembered not for their past, but for the goodness of their present acts. They laughed and cried and argued in quiet corners of the village, speaking of Germany, of friends and family who would never return, of towns and homes destroyed, of lives interrupted, yet also of dreams of love, of freedom, of belonging, and each conversation strengthened the invisible bonds between them, reminding them that even after years of loss, human connection could endure and even flourish. They walked along the riverbanks, noticing reflections of the sky and the water, the movements of birds, the shimmer of sunlight, and in the ordinary, they found extraordinary meaning in the ordinary work. They found satisfaction that had nothing to do with orders or authority and everything to do with presence and care. They sewed and cooked and cleaned and tended, and each act became a declaration of existence, a way to say we are here we are, more than the labels the war imposed, we are human. They knew that leaving would mean stepping back into a world of uncertainty, rubble and fear, yet staying required courage to ask for acceptance, to claim a place in a society that had been wary but now offered trust and friendship. They chose to plead for life beyond the shadow of war, to claim a future that was their own, to embrace the land that had once been enemy, yet now offered sanctuary. They learned the patience of waiting, the resilience of hope, the courage of asking, and in doing so discovered that survival was not enough, that life could be rich with meaning, that peace could be found in human connection and kindness. And in these quiet acts of determination, they found freedom, the freedom to love, the work, to nurture children, to cultivate gardens, to build homes, and friendships, to imagine a future beyond fear and captivity. And in this free,